Boardroom Bound, episode 141, Owning Your Seat in the Boardroom with Jill Griffin.
I would encourage listeners to think about what they have a strong skill set in, and then start thinking about drafting a book. Because today's world, you really don't have to find a publisher. You can self-publish, put it on Amazon, and I think they'd be quite pleased at what could happen.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Boardroom Bound. My name is Alexander Lowry, and this is the podcast dedicated to intentional leadership in the boardroom. My goal is to give aspiring and existing directors the tips, tactics, and strategies necessary to transform your confidence and build a successful career as a board director. Quick reminder, you can get all of today's show notes at podcast.gordon.edu. And in today's show, we're speaking with Jill Griffin. She is the vice chair and independent board director at Luby's Fuddruckers Restaurants, which is a New York Stock Exchange company. And she's been on that board for about 18 years or so. Quite a bit of experience there. Also has other experience she's going to talk about today at being the chair of a very large, very public nonprofit organization, high profile, also being on an advisory board. And in addition to that, she is an author. She's going to tell the story about how her first book got her on that first board seat. But also she's got her seventh book, I think, which is the most relevant for all of us to want to pick up a copy of today, is Earn Your Seat on a Corporate Board. So she's going to talk about what it's like being on a board and how that network opened up other board opportunities for her, and now how she's in many ways giving back and sharing her knowledge by the book that she's written for many of us. And she's got a lot of great stories to share.
Before we jump into today's show, I'd like to share a message from our sponsor about director certification. Want to join your first board, or are you looking for additional board seat opportunities? In either scenario, be sure to be disciplined in your approach. Now, through the Becoming an Exceptional Board Director Candidate Coaching and Certification course, you get both modern board director candidate packaging and modern board operations knowledge integrated within one program. Remember, the key to landing additional or your first board seat is in your packaging. Make the effort to do it right. Program graduates also receive their globally recognized International Board Director Competency Designation upon course completion. It's designed for individuals and groups. You can learn more at bit.ly/IBDC-D. That's bit.ly, bit.ly/IBCDC-D. And now let's jump into the show.
Jill Griffin, welcome to the Boardroom Bound podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this is great because I love having people on the show who are experts in board stuff, from both serving on the boards and educating others. And we're going to cover both of those today because you're a long-standing board member, also chair of multiple boards, and also have written on the subject. This is going to be great fun, but I tend to get ahead of myself here and want to dive into it. But let me step it back. You didn't become this expert overnight. This took quite a while to build that expertise and that reputation. So maybe you can give us a bit of your career arc before we dive into the show.
Sure. Out of graduate school, I joined RJR in their brand management track, and that's where I really learned the art of marketing. It's like getting a PhD in marketing. So I was there for 6 years, came to Austin to join a startup hotel company. That went okay, but I was there about 2 years, and then I started lecturing at UT School of Business while I started writing my first book.
And we talk a lot on this show with different people who've written books. I imagine that's not necessarily easy to do, and that wasn't the last book you wrote. Is it 6, 7? How many are you up to now?
Yeah, I think I'm up to 7.
Okay.
I'll tell you, here's the secret. I had a great English teacher in high school, and I had the ability to have her 3 years. And she came from the big city of Charlotte. And the only reason we got her was because she was coming to our school to be closer to her mother, who wasn't doing well. So I had her for 3 years. I had every theme I ever wrote for her, and it started out not easy, but it got easier and easier. And when I started writing books, I thought about her and just the fact that a book is really a lot of themes connected.
And so what was that first book you wrote? Do you remember?
Yes, it was Customer Loyalty, How to Earn It, How to Keep It.
All right. And that has been a very good brand for you because that's what landed you your first board role, right?
That's exactly right. And what's interesting about that book, there were no books out there at the time on customer loyalty. They were all on customer satisfaction, customer retention. And so I was one of the first. And I kept saying to myself, I can't be the smartest guy in the room here. Wonder why nobody else is writing on this. But I got a great editor, Beth Anderson, who's now EVP of Audible, and we worked together to create that book, and it all worked out.
And so talk us through that process. So you're at UT McCombs, you're instructing there, and you're writing a book. Help us understand what happened from that to where the board seat came about.
So I go down to San Marcos, which is a little tiny town south of Austin. It's bigger now, but at the time it was a tiny town. I went down there and gave a presentation to about 6 or 7 business owners, had dinner, and drove back. Didn't think much about it. And then about 2 days later, and thank goodness I was at my desk, I get a telephone call. And the female caller on the end of the line says, "Please hold for Mr. Red McCombs." Well, Mr. Red McCombs is, he gave $50 million to the business school. He's made a fortune in cars.
Yeah.
And so I pick up the line, and he says, "Professor Griffin," and knowing Mr. McCombs how I do, he always goes to the highest level. Of course I wasn't a professor, but he says, "I always knew there was something about those J.D. Power ratings that weren't right. And then I read the first chapter of your book, and now I get it. It's not about satisfaction, it's about loyalty." So we had a nice conversation. We stayed in touch. He gave me a very nice blurb on my next book, and he also introduced me to General Robert Harris, who at the time was the head of USAA. And I went down to see General Harris, and we hit it off. And General Harris nominated me for the board seat on Luby's Photo Records.
Well, I'll say I'm a loyal USA member. I'll put my own advert in there. Been a lifelong member of them, and I love what they do. But it's amazing how the world is small here. So you've just talked about an amazing connection. It gave you another connection. It led to the next thing. It's sort of like why people can understand LinkedIn is so powerful. It's not clearly the personal touch you just got, but you can see the 3 degrees of connection, how that just worked.
That's exactly right. And, it was serendipitous for me. I know that. But at the same time, they say that when the student's ready, opportunity presents itself.
So walk us through that was like for you. So that General Harris meeting changed everything for you, Jill, which is fantastic. That is an opportunity you wouldn't want to have blown, right? Because clearly doors opened from that. Give us a sense what it looked like to be in that meeting, how you handled it well, such that he was going, "Okay, Jill, I know someone to connect you with."
Well, first of all, when I pulled into USAA, they had a parking place for me that said, "Welcome, Jill Griffin," which I thought, man, how neat was that? So I got in that meeting with him, and he is a big fan of General Washington and the Continental Army. So we read that. We talked about that because I'm also a history buff in that period. And then he changes the subject and he says, so you want me to write your foreword for your next book? And I said, that is true. I do. And so he wrote this amazing foreword, but also introduced me to the board, and I was nominated. Now, I have another war story for you.
No pun intended, though, right?
That's right. Okay, so Chris Pappas, who's CEO of Pappadeaux, Papa Pizza, all those marvelous restaurants in Houston, he came to check me out, and he told me that he had always had a suspicion of people that were marketing majors because they really didn't know the world as it should be. And so I listened to him and really didn't take the bait. And when it was my turn to talk, he said to me, do you believe you are in the top 1% of all marketers? And I said, Chris, no, I'm not in the 1%. I said, Madonna is in the 1% of all marketers. I said, Michael Dell is in the 1% of all marketers. But I certainly consider myself in the top 10%. And as far as having a methodology, and then I piled my 3 books on the table, and I pushed them toward him. I said, this is my methodology.
Now, you and I were talking before the show started that you were phrasing this very well about how that first book led you to your first board seat. And I love the phrase you gave me. You said, the book is the best brochure you can have.
That is absolutely right. I really believe that, because the truth was, I was a nobody in Austin. I mean, I taught over at UT and all that, but I didn't have a very high profile. But then when that book came out, not only did it give me a high profile in Austin, but it gave me a high profile nationally and ultimately internationally. So I traveled the world talking about that book. I got to chair the European Conference on Customer Management a couple of years. That was in London. And it was just a thrill for me, an absolute thrill.
And Jill, one of the things we talk a lot about on this show is when someone says, I'm looking for a board, it really doesn't have any context, right? You need to know what's your specific skill set, what type of board you're joining. It's a big, broad thing. We could narrow that down a lot. But I will suggest that one of the things we should all take away from this is you became an expert on something. You became an authority on a subject. And that's what has served you so well, because you could find the opportunities, or someone found them for you in your network, where your specific skill set was going to be of value because you built that position of authority, and your books helped you to do that. Do you think that's a fair summary?
Oh, I think it is. Absolutely. And I would encourage your readers, your listeners, to think about what they have a strong skill set in. And if they don't have a strong skill set, get a strong skill set in whatever moves their heart and whatever their passion is. And then start thinking about drafting a book. Because in today's world, you really don't have to find a publisher. You can self-publish. And it's just, put it on Amazon. And I think they'd be quite pleased at what could happen.
Well, clearly it has opened the doors for you, and you're prolific, right? Number 7, as we were talking about now, which I find very impressive. That was not the last board seat you got. Sort of the Fuddruckers is clearly you've grown and developed 18 years there. You're the vice chair of it. It makes a lot of sense, but other opportunities open for you as well. So, for example, we were talking before, you're an advisory board member for Broadway Bank. So maybe you can give us an example about how that came about.
Yes, that came about through Joe McKinney, who I met on the Fuddruckers Ruby's board. He and I and a gentleman named Brent Jenkins came to the board at the very same time. So we got to be very close, and we would ride to the board meetings together, and we would ride back. So we all knew what was on each other's minds before we arrived at the board meeting and then after the board meeting. And that was very helpful to me.
And I would suggest to our audience that that is not an atypical experience, that when you serve on a board with other people who are probably also thinking about other boards themselves, connected to other boards, have their own network, once they know you, they value you, they trust you, they understand your specific skill set, it is not uncommon for your name to be put forward by someone for another opportunity that they hear about. And I imagine you probably see that firsthand when you guys are thinking about, geez, what's the other board members we need for Fuddruckers? And I realize the chair of the NomGov is responsible for that. But Jill, talk us what it's like behind the scenes. If you pull back the curtain when you're looking for someone, does everybody put names in? How do you go through the process? I imagine there's a short list you guys probably then give to the headhunting firms.
Well, we never really used a headhunter. We've always networked among our members. And Dr. Judith Craven, who was a mentor to me for years, really needed somebody on our board that really understood IT. And so she put forth the name Twyla Day, who is very much an expert in the field of IT. And she's been very valuable to our board.
And I know from your board experience, there's another one that you sort of gush about that I just want to make sure we get into it as well. And it sounds like it's something you're very proud of, being the chairwoman for visionaustin.org, which I imagine is another very high profile opportunity. How did that one come about?
That came about from Glenn West and his wife, Vicki, and Bob Lander. And honestly, when they took me to the Headliners Club, I was really surprised that they wanted to be the good board chair. And I guess I just didn't see it coming, but it was a fantastic opportunity. I got to meet Vince Gilligan, who is the creator of Breaking Bad. It was just amazing what I got to learn about how the city of Austin operates, all of that. And I led the recruitment for our new chair, Tom Noonan. And it's the first time I had chaired a recruitment committee where everybody was on the same page and wanted this particular gentleman. So we got him. I negotiated the contract with a headhunter, and all ended well. And he's a great, great guy.
Now, Jill, I'd love your insights on nonprofit boards. And I know you're a big fan of Visit Austin.org. You said it was the most fun you've had as a board member, which was a great experience. There are some people that view nonprofit boards as like, that's what I'm going to do on the side. That's the way I give back. That's a wonderful thing. Others see it as a stepping stone. And there's such a wide range from, say, a local mom and pop to large nationally or internationally known organizations like the American Red Cross and other things like that. You can imagine in every major city, there are certain ones that are the boards to be on, and probably has a very big price tag that you would need to give or get to be a part of doing it. Can you give us a sense of what it felt like being on such a high-profile board, just imagining the other people, I'm sure some brand-name people there that probably have just amazing networks to be a part of, surely clearly work to do, fundraising to be done, things like that. But take us behind the scenes of a big nonprofit board.
Well, the comment I would make about nonprofits, and I do believe in them, you get as close to the money as you can, because that is where the power is. And getting, chairing the finance committee, something like that can really sharpen your skills. But the closer you can get to the money, the better.
And now, in addition to being on multiple boards and being very well networked from some of the names you're sharing with us today, and there are 7 books out there, not all of them are on customer loyalty. You've got one that I'm a big fan of, Earning Your Seat on a Corporate Board. Maybe you can talk us through the evolution of the books you were writing before to this one here.
Yes. Well, I loved I loved the process so much of being a board member, and I wanted to open the door for others. In fact, the way this came about, I was sitting at the airport that services Paris, and I was getting my head back, thinking after a wonderful vacation with a girlfriend, and I said to myself, what do I care the most about? And it came to me, I care the most about serving on a corporate board and helping other people get on one. And so I started working on that book pretty soon after I got back to Austin. And honestly, it was kind of a hard book to write because I had to create a lot of language about skill buckets, your subject matter expertise, your general expertise, those kind of things. But I had a lot. I self-published this one, and my self-publisher, she's a fine editor, and she helped me bring the book together. So I'll always be grateful for her. But yes, it was, I'm really proud of the book, and I think it is one of my best books.
Well, clearly we're going to link to in the show notes, and it sounds like exactly the sort of book many in our audience would benefit from. So maybe you can tell us a bit more about it, the sort of stuff that you're covering, and sort of what someone would be able to do after they finish the book.
Yes. Okay. So I start out by saying serving on a corporate board, why I love it, and you will too, how boards work, truths to think about. I have a testing your readiness audit that they take to gauge their fit. I give 7 actions. So testing your readiness is action number 1. Action number 2 is crafting your board search strategy. And, the good news is everything's out on the internet. So you can go on, see who's on these boards, what seats do they hold, what expertise do they hold, are they stepping down? Could you potentially network your way into that board seat? Finding boards that would welcome you and how action breeds clarity, and attracting boards to you. And I talk about your personal brand. And of course, my personal brand was customer loyalty. But they need to really understand what their personal brand is. And then networking rules. And I went out to the 2 best networkers I knew, 2 men. And they said that it was not about taking, it was about giving. And the next time you sit beside let's say somebody at a networking event at a round table, and the person you expect to be there isn't there, but they sent their assistant, you should celebrate, because that person is the one that knows where all the bodies are buried. They know how to get into that network, and that person can be your new best friend. And then vetting your board, also acing your board interviews. And I talk about before the interview, during the interview, and after the interview. And I am a big proponent of writing a handwritten thank you note to whoever interviewed you. Because people don't get handwritten notes very often,
right.
And it will make you stand out. In fact, I write thank you notes or just popping in to say hello notes all the time.
It really does stand out, right? People get a lot maybe around Christmas time, but apart from that, there's not much old school mail that goes out these days. And I think especially if you've got, say, some beautiful stationery, when it shows up, it resonates.
It does. And if you don't have great stationery, get on American Stationery. They have a great website, and get yourself some great stationery, because it does stand out. And having it monogrammed with your initials or whatever is, it will set you apart.
I wonder if you're going to get some mail after this episode, Jill.
Well, I'd be happy to get mail.
Well, let's take that for a second. Let's imagine someone after this is like, well, you know what? I think I love eating at Fuddruckers. It's great. I love the way Jill talks about it. Probably a good fit for me. People on this show are often thinking, how do I stand out? How do I have the position of authority that I'm in? I know that I need to find the right opportunities that are fit for me. What's it like when people do outreach to you, Jill? What's the best rate? I know you said it's about giving, not taking, right? So someone might come with some insights, some ideas.
Yes, I welcome outreach, and I will help people as much as I can. I do suggest, though, and this is not trying to sell books, but if they read Earn Your Seat on a corporate board first before they reach out to me, they'll be much better informed of what it takes to serve on a corporate board. And that would be my only request.
And of course, there's a learning curve, right, between, say, just the advisory board, your nonprofit board, the public company board, and there's so many other variations in between, so say a small private company, et cetera. There are lots of different skills and experiences that you need. Now, unfortunately, just about everybody has their head set on, I want to be in a public company board, right? And Fuddruckers is on the New York Stock Exchange. That sort of ticks that box. But let's also do some level setting for some people. So if you spent 20, 30-year career working in a small cap company, the odds of working in a large public company, I would think it's typically above, I'm a baseball guy, it's probably above the level that you're at, right? You think about moving up from the minors to the majors. How do you help people rationalize where they should be focusing their time?
I tell you, I'm a big believer in micro cap and small cap companies. Because if you get to those large cap companies, you've got to be almost a celebrity to get those seats. So the micro cap and the small cap are where the action is for people like us.
And what's been the biggest surprise for you, I guess, being part of a public company on the board? I'm sure there have been a couple of stories that have come out of it. What is something that you would think our listeners, wow, they never would have thought of this?
Well, let's see. Let me just think about that. I think I met some of my dearest friends on the Fuddruckers Libby's meetings. Arthur Emerson, that's now he does fundraising for the public radio station, public television station in San Antonio. He's one of the sharpest dressers I have ever seen, and I've always appreciated that about Arthur. He's just, oh my gosh, he's just such a wonderful, honest man. And so that really, I didn't know that was going to happen. And these are some of my dearest friends now. That if I needed to make a telephone call because I was in trouble, one of those would probably be my first call.
Well, let's go with the idea of using one of our lifelines here, the old I Want to Be a Millionaire game show. So, Jill, if I were saying, oh man, someone's asking me what the future of the boardroom would look like, I would call you up and say, Jill, I know you're the vice chair of a public company. I think you're probably thinking about this. What would you say? I mean, the board world has changed so much just during COVID, right? The idea that maybe we can be okay if we don't all get together in person all the time. Lots is happening. What are your thoughts on the future of the boardroom?
Well, I think until everybody gets vaccinated and they have this herd composite, we will continue to do board meetings by Zoom. And that's what we're doing now. I don't know when it'll go back to normal. I'm still trying to get my 2 shots. I don't have them yet. But maybe some of your readers have some tips for me there. But I think we will still remain wearing masks for a long time. I really do. And social distancing.
Well, there's no question that the boardroom role has changed a lot in the last year, and there's no question that there will be some permanent changes that happen as a result of this. So we're all trying to stay abreast of those, and we appreciate you, Jill, sort of sharing back all of your story today and being very honest and open about some of the fun stuff and what you've learned. And clearly one of the main takeaways for all of us is that the book is the best brochure that you can have. So we were delighted to have you on the show today. Thank you for sharing your insights and helping all of us to be boardroom bound. That's it for this episode of Boardroom Bound. I really enjoyed chatting with Jill Griffin. You can see that she loves being on boards, and that's why she was excited to write the book about earning your corporate board seat, to give back and to help prepare others to be able to follow in those footsteps, and had a lot of great stories along the way. Now remember, if you head over to podcast.gordon.edu, you will find links to all of today's resources. Please know that the Boardroom Bound team and I are so proud to be your go-to podcast for all things that connect, prepare, and empower you to land a board seat. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any of the high-quality content that we're bringing to you every Wednesday. Thanks for joining me today. I can't wait to share more stories and strategies from brilliant business minds with you again next week. Remember to keep tuning in to be Boardroom Bound.